I've never really been into big birthday celebrations. I prefer small gatherings with close friends or family, and they know what I'm like, so they usually expect something low key. One year after having a birthday dinner with my family at a local restaurant, nothing fancy, a few friends messaged me about hanging out. We were all about 19 at the time, so going to bars wasn't an option. My buddy had a Jeep that his parents bought him, and he suggested some nighttime off-roading on trails in a state park not far away from where we lived. It was a big park with wide trails where he'd gone before. We knew it wasn't officially allowed, but there wasn't any security at night. It was summertime, so the days were long and it didn't get dark until around 9 p.m. We made our way to the park, keeping an eye out for the cops as we entered. Once inside, we used Rob's bright headlights to see better. The trail was bumpy and narrow in places, and Rob drove carefully to avoid scratching the car. It was a lot of fun though, nevertheless, and we were laughing the whole time. We'd brought some weed and a bottle of vodka with us to celebrate. We hotboxed the car and blasted music while we drank and smoked. It was all pretty chill for a while until we heard a strange noise outside. The fact that we all heard it over the loud music made us fall silent. Rob stopped the music and we all just stared at each other. It sounded like a high-pitched scream. Rob turned on the headlights, but we didn't see anything or anyone. We figured it might have been a female fox that we'd heard. We decided to move spots anyway, so Rob drove a little further down the trail, then parked up again. We went back to hanging out again, but with the music lower this time. At one point, my friend sang me a loud happy birthday as a joke. Needing to pee, I got out of the car and went into the woods a bit. I was halfway through peeing when I heard what I'm sure were footsteps nearby. I cut off midstream and dashed back to the car. I told my friends, and Rob turned his headlights back on again, and that's when we saw a woman standing in front of the car. She had her hood up and didn't say anything. Rob rolled down his window and asked if she was okay, but she stepped back into the woods without a word and disappeared. That's when Sean, who was pretty wasted, noticed something terrifying. He said, "Guys, we're surrounded." It was like the words were dropped in my ears. We looked around and saw at least 3 other people in hoodies staring at us from different sides of the car. And this was not a cold night, remember, which made it even scarier that they were all wearing hoodies in the woods in July. And then Sean screamed and we all turned to the back seat where he was sitting and saw a man right outside the back window looking in. He had this haunting deadpan expression and the taillights gave him a red glow. He looked like something from hell. I yelled at Rob to get us out of here and he sped through the bumpy trail over all the rocks. It felt like ages before we got out of the park, but when we eventually did, we were all so relieved. Rob, who was the most sober, decided we were going straight home. We couldn't figure out if those people were just other young people hanging out in the woods, playing a prank, or something more sinister. But the way they stared at us and that guy at the back window gave us all the creeps for sure. We never went night off-roading again after that. I'll always remember my little sister's 5th birthday, but not because it was a happy occasion. We were at a kid's place that throws princess parties for small children. I didn't want to do the princess stuff or take part in any activities because, well, I wanted to seem tough and grown up even though I was only in 6th grade. So I stayed out in the hallway playing my DS. Then a lady I didn't know came up to me and asked if I was Susan's kid. Susan is my mum's name, so I said yes. She said she was my Auntie Katie and said I probably wouldn't remember her because it was ages since we last saw each other and I was only a baby back then. She talked about how I'd grown and asked about school. I got this kind of chit-chat a lot from family members, so I didn't think twice and answered her. Auntie Katie said she'd got my sister a big doll's house as a present. She'd also got a big birthday cake and said she'd give me the first slice if I carry the doll's house in from the car. I was almost 12, so I knew about bad people, but I trusted Auntie Katie because she was a woman. I agreed and followed her outside. Her car was still running and there was a man in the car. She said it was my Uncle Paul and rushed me to hurry with the dollhouse. But that's when I started to feel weird. Why didn't she just ask Uncle Paul to help? And why was the car still running when there was parking spots? It didn't make any sense. I stayed put and said no. Auntie Katie got mad and told me to come to the car. She tried grabbing my jacket, but I swatted her hand away and yelled. She looked really mad, and for a second I thought Uncle Paul might get out of the car. But then my mum and my other aunt yelled my name loudly from inside. Auntie Katie jumped in the car immediately and they sped off. I ran inside and told my mum everything. My mum hugged me and said sorry. My aunt, my real aunt, told the workers at the children's place and they made sure all the kids were okay. The police came and talked to me. I told them about this fake Auntie Katie and Uncle Paul. They said they'd tell us if they found anything, but we never heard from them. I still don't know how Auntie Katie knew my mum's name. I'm just glad I'm safe and try not to think about what could have happened if I followed her to the car. I've got an uncle who is quite rich and has a cool house by the water with a big yard and a pool. He was out of town for the month on business, so he let me use it for my 21st birthday party. I invited my friends and said they could bring whoever they want as long as they brought their own beer. I wanted to make it a big one. You only turn 21 once after all. A lot more people ended up turning up than I expected. There were friends of friends, and even some total strangers thrown in the mix. I felt like the man. The party started at 8 and I told everyone to stay in the yard and not go inside the house, but people didn't listen. There were about 80 people in the yard by 9 p.m. with music blaring from the outside speakers. Everyone was having a great time, but I was worried about cleaning up and possible damage. I tried to keep track of who went in and out of the house. The party got crazier as the night went on, and eventually the police came to shut it down because of noise complaints from the neighbors. I had to ask everyone to leave except a few close friends. After a while, they left too until eventually it was just me and my friend Brad left outside. My uncle had specifically told me that no one was allowed to sleep over, but Brad was blackout drunk, and I didn't think one person would hurt. So I walked him inside, then went back out to lock the gates and the back door. When I came back in, Brad was passed out on the couch, so I left him to it. Looking around, it didn't look like the cleanup was going to be too bad. I went upstairs to bed, thinking it was a bit tight that my uncle didn't let anyone stay over, even though there were plenty of extra beds. In the early hours, I woke up feeling sick from mixing too many drinks. I went to the bathroom, threw up, and then went out onto the balcony that overlooks the foyer and another living area. That's when I heard footsteps downstairs in the foyer. I looked down and saw a figure in the darkness. They seemed to be looking at me, but I couldn't be sure. I called out thinking it was Brad, but they didn't respond. Then I heard snoring from the living room, and it dawned on me that the figure wasn't Brad. I said, "Who's that?" thinking maybe it's another party guest that fell asleep drunk somewhere, but no one answered. Then, trying to sound casual, I said, "I'm going back to bed," and went back to my room, locked the door, and was about to call 911 when I remembered that I'd left Brad out there. I called his phone, but he didn't pick up. I hung up and dialed 911. As I was whispering to the operator, someone twisted the doorknob and knocked lightly on the door. I asked the operator what to do, and they said not to let them know I was on the phone with the police. I said, "What about Brad?" and the operator paused and said, "Just wait for the police to show up." I don't think they even knew what was best. I waited in the locked bedroom until the police arrived. They came in through the back door, which the intruder had left open. I went down and explained everything to them. I also woke up Brad, who had slept through everything and thankfully was okay. I searched the house for signs that anything was missing, but it was tough because I didn't know what was there beforehand. I didn't tell my uncle about it until he noticed his watch missing, and then I had to admit what happened, and he was angry. He didn't make me pay for the stolen watch, but there were no more parties at his house after that.